All right. Good evening, everyone. Glad y'all are already in the chat. Let's see. You got Nate. Wow, whoa. What's up, people? Michelle, Ben. Yes. All right. Good evening, everyone. And for those who are going to see this later, welcome to the channel. I think this is my first live for the new year. So we got a good one for you tonight. Got my brother Adam, who you all know needs no introduction. We're gonna introduce him anyway. So, sir, go ahead and introduce yourself.
What's going on, bro? What's happening with you, man? Y'all know what it is. Adam Coleman for True ID Apologetics. Glad to be here, man. I'm glad to ring in the new year with you. You said this is your first one?
Yeah, my first live. I did a video last year. Yeah, so
Got you. Okay. So actually, it's funny. I think I've gone live on your channel before I went live on my own for the new year. So
oh really?
I haven't even gone live on my channel yet.
Well,
So that's what it is.
we also well, I don't know if I should get the cat out the bag, but I guess there's something coming out on your channel that we did earlier.
Oh yeah, no. Well, actually, it's already kind of out of the bag because I posted it today.
Oh,
So
you did?
yeah. It's on the channel scheduled for tomorrow. So
Yeah.
you be live and in color on True ID Apologetics tomorrow, man. No doubt. With MJ Jackson, nonetheless. Shout out to
Absolutely.
MJ. Shout out to all the people in the chat. What's good, UA community? Y'all know what it is.
Amen. So let's not waste any time. I mean, I really think that this is an argument that is not talked about as much. And I know you and I have been kind of going back and forth for a few months, kind of like talking about doing something live on this topic. And well, I always forget. So before that happens, if you have not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. Our goal here is to help everyone enter into a confirmed, confident, and eternal relationship with the source of all life and purpose. And with that being said, get back to the argument. So the contingency argument.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for those that may not even know what that is, can you just explain in layman's terms, the best you can, the contingency argument in a nutshell? I mean, the main contingency argument.
Got you. Yeah, so there's actually a lot of different versions of the contingency argument. So actually, let me take a step back already. So in we call it natural theology, apologetics, whatever you want to call it, there are a number of different types of arguments. So you have cosmological arguments, you have what you might call pneumatological arguments, and that's where you're going to get into like arguments from rationality and things like that. You have arguments from reason. You have teleological arguments. That has to do with how the world is ordered, the fact that there's this complexity and specificity in nature. Then you're going to have like moral arguments, or axiological arguments, and then again circling back, we have cosmological arguments, which is where the contingency argument falls in. Okay, it's under the category of arguments called cosmological arguments. So the contingency argument, like all other cosmological arguments, it actually comes in two different phases. Okay, usually in the first part of a cosmological argument, you're going to have essentially you're going to have an argument that establishes that there's some fundamental level of reality. And I'll explain further in a second, kind of what I mean by that. But there's something fundamental about reality that points to there being, basically that accounts to, that accounts for everything else in reality. That's kind of what you're looking at. And so you're basically establishing like something like a necessary entity or a first cause or something like that. And then in the second phase, that's where philosophers will kind of get in the weeds and try to figure out what kind of cause that would need to be. All right. So likewise with the contingency argument, there's various different ways to formulate it. Typically somebody like myself or like William Lane Craig or Theus, I mean, we're going to formulate it in a way that helps people to see that we're pointing to God as being that foundational cause. So usually that will be the conclusion. But nevertheless, I mean, it's actually with the contingency argument and others like it, you have some atheists who will agree, with the first phase, that there is indeed some fundamental level of reality, like somebody like a Graham Oppie or something like that is stone cold atheist, but he would agree, nevertheless, that there's something fundamental. So you don't have to be. What's that?
Graham's a brilliant guy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's like the, I guess, I don't know, LeBron James of atheists right now. I don't know, what I mean, but he's up there. Maybe I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe it's Carmelo. I don't know. He's getting up in age there. You know what I mean? But nevertheless, I guess I just said that to say, as far as the first phase of establishing that there is a base level of reality, that's not something that's exclusive to theists. It's usually when you get into the second phase and identifying what that first phase is like, that's where we get into it. So actually, I do have some slides that I think will kind of help. And I know you said you kind of give it in a nutshell. You know how I can do. I had I can't prepare for like a 45-minute presentation. You're saying, but I'm gonna condense it to 4 or 5 minutes rather than 45. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
we'll
So
go
fair
for
enough.
it.
Let's can you walk us through the Leibnizian, it's a hard word to say, the
Leibnizian, yeah,
the
sure.
contingency argument that Leibniz kind of designed or spearheaded. I think that's the most popular one, I guess. Would you say that?
Well, I guess popular in terms of like in the circles that we roll in, you know what I'm saying? And it's popular in the sense that, I mean, it's been around for a while and people are still, getting a lot of mileage out of it. But with the contingency argument, there's various different formulations. And, some people prefer non-Leibnizians for reasons I can explain later.
Yeah.
But actually the Leibnizian version is the one that I employed when I wrote my chapter on in the urban apologetics book. It's the version that I use or appeal to. So yeah, let me bring it up on the screen. All right. Where am I at here? Oh, okay, here we go. Boom. Did I bring it up on the screen? I don't know what just happened. I just clicked on something. I don't know what just happened. Oh, snap. Oh,
Yeah.
here we go. Oh, there we go. Okay. Is that?
Yeah, but
Do
can
you see
you
that?
I see it, but it's not showing just the slide, it's showing everything, like all your different files and stuff.
Oh, that's weird because I just clicked on it so it wouldn't do that. So I don't know why it's doing that. What about now? I am a professional, ladies and gentlemen. I promise you. Um, all right, let's try this again. All right, how about that?
Yeah.
There we go. There we go. All right, cool. I'm using a different program that I don't normally use. Instead of PowerPoint, I'm switching. I've been switching it up lately, so that kind of threw me off a little bit. But yeah, here we go. Ta-da! The contingency argument. Okay, so just got a little bit of background. Again, we're going to be looking at the Leibnizian version. So you have this guy named Wilhelm Gottfried Leibniz. I probably jacked up the name. It sounds pretty
Yeah.
close to me,
Yep.
but he was a like was it old school philosopher? I'll just put it that way. You know what I'm saying? He was pretty bright guy. You know what I'm saying? Put out a lot of work, if you will. And he had he pretty much kind of posed this question like, why is there something rather than nothing? Like why is there anything at all? why does anything exist? Like it seems like there would be an explanation for things. And as he kind of explored that notion, he came to conclude that there seems to be at least two. We'll put it this way, especially kind of put our modern language on it, but we can identify two different kinds of entities. Okay, we have contingent entities, and we have necessary entities. Now I'm going to show why that kind of a distinction needs to be made. You feel actually, if I can read a portion of the book, is that cool? And
Absolutely.
we'll kind of go into it. All right, let's try that. So this is a portion of the book that I wrote in the Urban Apologetics book that came out last year. I spoke about a guy named Zera Yacob, who was it's roughly a contemporary of guy. I'm not even gonna try. I'll just say Leibniz. I'm not even trying to say the whole name again. He came slightly before Leibniz and was in Ethiopia. Sometimes he's called the father of the Ethiopian Enlightenment. He was raised in a Christian community and exiled. And during his time in exile, he wrestled with some pretty heavy questions, including the existence of God. And I want to read a portion of what would later become, I believe, the only works that we have from him is called the Hatata, which means the inquiry. And it was compiled by one of his students later on in his life. And so I'm going to read from what was labeled chapter 2 from it. And you'll see why this whole contingent and necessary thing comes into play. All right. So
being exiled on an island will make you have some weird thoughts, huh?
Yeah, well, yeah, probably so. Well, he was actually even worse. He wasn't even in an island, man. He was in a cave.
Oh man.
There was a ruler at the time who apparently somebody like snitched on him and said that he was trying to, do the rule of dirty or undermine his authority, and they was gonna have him killed. So he dipped out with nothing but a couple pounds of gold and the book of Psalms. Interesting enough.
Wow.
And so actually, and you'll see it here, actually you can probably see it on the screen, but he would reflect on the Psalms as he would think about some of these philosophical issues, and that's what drove him to come up with what we're about to see here. So you can see it right here in the first line. Later on, I thought of the words of the same David. Is the inventor of the ear unable to hear? And I said, who is it that provided me with an ear to hear? Who created me as a rational being? And how have I come into this world? Where do I come from? Had I lived before the creator of the world, I would have known the beginning of my life and of the consciousness of myself. Who created me? Was I created by my own hands? But I did not exist before I was created. If I say that my father and my mother created me, then I must search for the creator of my parents and of the parents of my parents until they arrive at the first two who were not created as we are, but who came into this world in some other way without being generated. For if they themselves have been created, then I know nothing of their origin unless I say, he who created them from nothing must be an uncreated essence who is and will be for all centuries to come, the Lord and Master of all things, without beginning or end, immutable, whose years cannot be numbered. And I said, therefore, there is a creator, or else there would be no creation. This creator who endowed us with the gifts of intelligence and reason, can he himself be without them? For he created us as intelligent beings from the abundance of intelligence, and the same one being comprehends all, creates all, is almighty. So again, this is powerful stuff, bro. Like,
Yeah, I got
powerful stuff.
Now.
You said what?
I gotta go get the Hatadah now.
Oh yeah, I can send you a copy back. I got a translation that I can send you, and but it's powerful stuff. I mean, this is really high theology here. Now mind you, again, just before this passage, you have Zera Yacob wrestling with this idea that there's evil in the world and people doing grimy stuff, and like, how could there be a God? And so in response to his grappling with the problem of evil, he, we have this passage here where he kind of draws together different insights to demonstrate that there is indeed some sort of creator. Now, having read that, there's a couple ideas that come out here. There's a lot I can say, and if you want to hear more about it, you can definitely buy the book, Your Urban Apologetics, Restoring Black Dignity with the Gospel, as edited by Eric Mason. You can hear more, but there's a couple key ideas that'll kind of get us where we want to go here. All right. So Zera Yacob, he's got with what I call Zera Yacob's big three. Okay. So you have causes, right? He's again, remember the Hatadah, the meaning of it is the inquiry, and what you find out throughout his works is he's using questions to explore, various different things. And in this passage, we see three main questions. Where do I come from? Right. So I'm labeling that as causes. What's the cause? Where do we come from? So origins, maybe we could say. The second question is, who is it that provided me with an ear to hear? Now I use the word order there because elsewhere in the Hatadah, he attributes to function in the physical body of different biological beings as pointing to some sort of order in the universe. And so he has a whole other passage about that. So he's referring to order there. And then reason. I mean, you actually saw it there in the passage, like who created me as a rational being and how have I come into this world, So we're just going to focus on the C. We're just going to focus on those causes right there. All right. And I promise I'll be quick. I know we got a lot to get to. All right. So this passage right here, look at what he's saying. He's like, was I created by my own hands? Well, I didn't exist before I was created, so I couldn't create myself. Is essentially what he's saying. So you see him start to kind of run through the different possibilities about how he came about. He's like, well, okay, I can't look to myself as being the reason why I exist. And then he goes to the father and the mother and the the parents and parents, and he basically travels all the way back. He has this clause in here. It says, but beings who came into the world in some other way, without being generated, right? In other words, without being born. So I took that to mean like the physical constituents of the world, some sort of physical something that accounts for our existence, but not born. So maybe like atoms or whatever it may be. He might put that atoms and waves or whatever in that category. So he's basically saying, okay, when I look around and think about both now and going further and further back in the past, I can't find anything that exists that doesn't look to something else for its existence. Basically, you have this what I call the dependence problem, right? Everything that exists seems to depend on something else for its existence, right? And so there's a couple of different directions you can go with it. This would be a great way to lead into the Kalam. But in my book, I chose to go with the contingency argument because I really felt like he was honing on that dependence thing, and it's this idea that ultimately either everything depends on something else for its existence, or there must be some other kind of being, right? And that's what he comes to. There's an uncreated essence, right? There's an entity that does not rely on something outside of itself for its existence. So you have beings like us who will be contingent things. And let me go to my next slide so I explain that. And by contingent, what I mean is, I think I get my slides backwards. Okay, no, never mind, my bad. By contingent, I mean, those things that rely upon something else for their existence versus necessary things. And necessary things are those things that exist because of the necessity of their own nature, just based upon the kind of things that they are. They cannot not exist, right? Contingent things can possibly not exist. Like, so for example, if my parents had never got together, back in blah, 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 blah time, I don't want to put my age out there, but if my parents had never got together, then Adam Coleman wouldn't exist. If Apple never existed, then this iPhone wouldn't exist. I mean, there's all sorts of things that depend on other things for their existence. Those are the kind of things we call contingent things rather. Then you have like necessary things, and those are the kind of things that regardless of how the world worked out, there's no way that they could not exist, right? So some people would say things like moral values or something is necessary, or it could be mathematical truths like numbers and sets and things like that. Like those things, no matter how the world came together, numbers would exist no matter what. I mean, those are things that don't depend on something outside of themselves necessarily to exist. And so before I get to the argument, did you want to ask a question there? Or
no, I was thinking when I was doing apologetics with my oldest, she's only 10, but when I was, maybe it's a couple years ago, and we're walking through actually Jim Warner Wallace's book for kids, and I think that was more dealing with the cosmological, but basically just the idea. And I asked her, I was like, so you realize there was a time where you didn't exist and then you started existing. Like you didn't just spring into existence. And my 6-year-old or 7-year-old at the time could understand that concept. I'm just saying that because I want, so I know people are going to disagree with this in the comments later, but that's why the title of the video that way. This is an undeniable reality, like you said, that some things are contingent. There's no way around that. Now, theists and atheists might explain that reality differently, but the reality is the reality.
Well, yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. So, for example, this bottle of sweet tea right here, did this bottle have to exist, right? Did it have to exist as it is right here? No, probably not. It could be the case that Pure Leaf, the brand admitted, maybe they just never existed. They never existed, and so therefore they never made this, right? The other side of it is too, when we're thinking about contingency, there's, again, I'm kind of glossing over a couple things, but not only are you dealing with things in terms of whether they exist or not, but you're also dealing with the manner in which they exist. So, for example, if it could be the case that this bottle right here, if it could be the case that this was oval shaped, then there's some explanation as to why it's not oval shaped.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So when we kind of back it up, dealing with the universe, for example, even if you said something like, the universe has always existed and it just does, one can still ask the question, regardless of how old you think the universe is, even if you think it's eternal, you can still ask the question, well, why is the universe, why does it exist in the manner that it does, with these particular atoms? Why are atoms not different? You know what I'm saying? Why are, I'm just going down to like the base layer of physical reality. Why are waves, if you want to go into quantum mechanics, why are they not, like lightning bolts or something like that, or right. Whatever, so it's not just a matter of whether or not things exist, but it's also a matter of, existing in a particular way. And so I don't know, anybody, and I could be wrong, I might just be speaking on my ignorance here, but I don't know anybody who believes and can argue well anyway that the universe exists and it had to exist in this particular way. It seems to me that would kind of outstrip just what we've explored, about the universe. And also it seems that you'd have to make a metaphysical claim about the laws of nature, being necessary and existing before the universe. So it gets into all kind of problems. But I said it's kind of backtracking for a second, excuse me. One of the main differences we want to key in on between contingent things and necessary things is that contingent things could fail to exist. They could not exist, versus necessary things, they cannot not exist. It's like they must exist given the nature of how they are, of what they are. So that's a key difference. And that kind of brings us into the argument. We can just kind of work our way through. Go ahead. We're giving it the nutshell version. But this is just one formulation. This is the one that I use in the book. It's drawing from the Leibnizian version. It says that premise one, everything that exists has an explanation of its existence, either in the necessity of its own nature or in an external explanation. Premise two, if the universe has an explanation of its existence, that explanation is God. Premise three, the universe exists. Therefore, the explanation of the universe's existence is God. Now, we can dig into the weeds a little bit, in these premises, but I'll just kind of run through them just real quick. And if we want to double back, we can do that.
Well, as you do that, this is actually good with the second question, because my next question was going to be, which premises in the argument have you gotten the most pushback on, or which ones do you think are the most contentious?
Yeah, so I think that the third one, the third premise, if somebody objects to that, then I mean, they're just trolling. You know what I'm saying? I'm not even tripping. Like if you're like, oh, maybe the universe doesn't exist, like whatever.
In the Matrix, bro.
Yeah, there you go. The second premise, I mean, people are going to give some pushback to that, but I believe if we're talking about in like the philosophical literature, the first premise is probably going to be the most contentious. You know what I'm saying? And so,
number two. Okay.
So that's number one. Everything that exists has an explanation of its existence, either in the necessity of its own nature or in an external explanation. Now, mind you, I'll just be clear that this is the formulation that I used in my book. And most often what you'll see is in that last clause, they'll say either in the necessity of its own nature or in an external cause, right? But in so much as explanations can be causal, I use the word explanation, and I felt like it captured what Zera Yacob was trying to say a little bit better. But that being said, that first premise is one version of what's called the principle of sufficient reason. That essentially things have reasons why they exist. That's kind of a lighter way of stating it. But a lot of people they take exception to the principle of sufficient reason, and we can maybe chat about that. Mm-hmm. But a matter of fact, let me go to the very next slide, because I'm breaking down it by premise by premise. We already kind of talked about that second point, explain, contingent and necessary. So I'll just kind of focus on the PSR. But some people,
real quick, as you do that though, can you also explain sufficient and necessary when you're talking about philosophical proof? So, sometimes people say, "Oh, okay, that's a sufficient cause, but it's not a necessary cause," or vice versa, and why both of those matter as you go.
Yes, actually, maybe I'll start there. So, like a sufficient cause would be, I'm trying to think of like a simple way to put it, but a sufficient cause would be something that can occur that would allow for something else to be true or real, mm-hmm. But then a necessary, something that's necessary, it's going to be a little stronger than that. It's like something that has to be in place in order for something else to be true or real. You know what I'm saying? So
I would say example.
Yeah.
If you walk in your house and you see a puddle of water on the floor, a sufficient cause could be one of the kids spilled a glass of water, but that's not the only cause. It's not a necessary cause, right? But it's sufficient for that to explain that situation.
Yeah. So for example, if you see spilled water on the floor when you walk in, a sufficient cause might be that, like you said, kids, spilled, water on the floor. The part that would be necessary would be the water, like, because you can't have spilt water on the floor without the water. You know what I mean? So whatever explanation there is, there's going to have to be water somewhere there in the mix. You see what I'm saying? Gotcha. So, that's kind of like a, quick sloppy way to look at it. But yeah, so with the principle of sufficient reason, it's essentially saying that there's, there are reasons for things. Like things exist for a reason. And so now you have, again, there's various different versions, and philosophers will construe it in different ways depending on how comfortable they feel with making their version like really strong, or just kind of, maybe taking a weak version of it. But Leibniz took a very strong version of, that basically all things that are factual have reasons, essentially. And then later on down the road, you have people, just kind of, shifting and matching different ways to put that, to make it a little bit more modest of a claim, right? So the way that I framed it, in the previous slide, would be an example of a claim, of a version of it that's more modest than maybe Leibniz would have put it himself. But so are there good reasons, for affirming that? Let me go back. Let's look at it again. That everything exists. That everything that exists has an explanation of existence, either in the necessity of its own nature or in an external explanation. Like, is there good reason to believe that? First of all, I think it just has a self-evidence to it. Mm-hmm. When we're dealing with philosophy, believe it or not, one of the things that really matters is accounting for like the deepest intuitions we have about how the world works. We see this in morality all the time, but not just morality. Of course, we have moral intuitions in terms of what we feel. I don't even like using the word feel, because it's something more ingrained than that. But how we perceive something to be wrong or evil. And likewise, we have intuitions about causes, like how can things come to exist, or how do things exist? And when we think about like, nobody who's watching this channel right now is concerned that their experience of watching Alice McElroy is going to be interrupted by Dracula appearing in their their living room and coming after him out of nowhere. Like, right. Nobody goes through the day bobbing and weaving because they fear a brick is going to appear out of nothing and hit them in the head. Like, nobody does that. Why? Because in our common everyday experience, we understand that things have causes. And it would be irrational to be concerned about, things that don't have causes popping into existence or what have you, So there's just kind of self-evidence, it kind of agrees with our deepest intuitions about, there being reasons for things. That being said, too, I'm going to take a little bit further. If you can imagine, well, just consider the word nothing, right? The word nothing points to there being a state of absolute negation, like just no thing. You know what I'm saying? Can a state of nothingness produce anything? No, because there's no capacities, for it to do that, right? So if things exist, we've got good reason to believe that they don't come from nothing, right? And if they don't come from nothing, then we have good reason to look for an explanation. So that would be the category of contingent things. But then what if there are things that just have always existed? Like, could those things exist like just cause? Or is it rational to look for reasons why they exist? I think we have all sorts of reasons to affirm that, well, actually, there's reasons why it is wrong. And no matter how the world could have, fell out, it's wrong to murder your neighbor. I'm saying, like, I believe that to be a necessary truth. I think that no matter what world you're in, I'm saying no matter whatever possible world, it would always be wrong to murder your neighbor for no reason. Yeah. And I think that that's grounded in there being a moral reality that makes such and such the case. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I don't want to go too far afield. But nevertheless, our deepest intuitions tell us, that, there's reasons for things, right? Secondly, when you look at science, science, it literally is the project of looking for reasons. That's like literally what they do every day, all day. They want to find a reason, why the universe exists, a reason why there's biological complexity, a reason, why, this being over here develops in such and such a way, but physics works different, over here. Yeah, it's all kinds of stuff. You know what I'm saying?
The whole endeavor of, most of the hard sciences, at least to your point, is the study of cause and effect. Either you right. know the cause and you're curious about the effect, or you see the effect and you're trying to figure out the cause.
Right.
Or you know the cause you want to produce and you go in the lab and you make it. So it's all
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And see, now this is where we're starting to shift gears a little bit as far as defending of the principle of sufficient reason, because on the one hand, I think somebody can properly adopt it and accept it to be more likely true than not, just given the fact that it's just so self-evident and it just jives with our deepest intuitions. I think it's rational to do that. But given that we're talking about a principle that really gets at to like the basic structure of reality, it's not the kind of thing that you would argue for on the basis of some simpler like explanation. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're talking about like base level explanations here, right? And so one of the ways that we want to demonstrate to others that, hey, this principle of sufficient reason, this first premise, really has some merit, is by showing the consequences of abandoning it, Okay, so while it is the case that science is the search for causes, well, if you abandon the principle of sufficient reason, then I think you have to give up on the project of science, because every time a guy goes into the lab to do any kind of experiment, whether it be a whatever collider or something that you're doing at your desk at the crib, whatever experiment you do, you're depending upon order in nature to do it, right?
Right.
But if things can just exist, with no explanation, then who's to say that in the middle of your experiment, you're doing something with a Bunsen burner and a frog disappears in your in your test tube or something like that. Like we depend upon this principle of explanation. Things aren't just going on in reality for no reason at all. Like it's not just like chaos out here. Like I don't want to spoil it, but if anybody saw like the Spider-Man No Way Home movie, where like these random different characters like popping into existence from these other universes. Like this world is not like that. I'm saying we don't live in Doctor Strange's multiverse. You know what I'm saying? So that being said, so anyway, if you don't have the kind of order in nature that I'm describing, and things can just exist and come into existence for no reason, then you've disrupted the kind of order that scientists would need to do their work. And there'll just be no rhyme or reason to it. I can go a little bit further, but I want to hit the other points too. But I will say this though. Let me just kind of end this point with this, and maybe we'll come back to some others. Another reason why we might want to accept the first premise, at least some version of it, would be that if things could exist for no reason at all, then we lose the ability to make judgments about our own thoughts, you know what I'm saying, in terms of they have any merit, because theoretically the whatever physical entities that are associated with your thought, you know what I'm saying, that you're having right now, say, I'm just saying, if you're a naturalist, they could just pop into your head out of nowhere, and now you're just thinking something that over which you have no control. Like our very thoughts would be unreliable if things could exist and just come into existence for no reason, because then we could say that could be going on in our own minds. And so that then you'd be embracing some sort of like rabid skepticism. So for all those reasons, it's dangerous to reject the PSR, some version of it. And so for that reason, we have good grounds to say, what, actually I think it's more plausibly true than not. Yeah. Do you actually want to go into the second premise, or
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, cool. So that's that there. And we can circle back later on, but nevertheless, that probably would be the most contentious premise. And so the second one, we get a little lighter here. We went from the most contentious, now we're kind of maybe lighten it up a little bit, but it would be the premise that if the universe has an explanation of its existence, then that explanation is God. Now, on the face of it, that might seem problematic. Oh, what's up?
I said I thought this one would be the most contentious, actually.
Well, I think philosophers contend about different things than we do. You know what I'm saying? Like I love philosophy. I mean, but the reality is, for any premise of any argument, there's going to be some philosopher that stubs his nose at it. You know what I'm saying? And I think that, because, when you think about it, many of the secular guys, they don't take God seriously anyway. Their interest is not going to be in the premise that revolves around God, because they're like, I ain't worried about that. No way. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to focus over here in the PSR. At least that's just my opinion why it may attract more attention.
Yeah.
That's just Adam Coleman's theory. But really, this one, when you think about it, there's a couple of reasons to think that it's not, that it shouldn't even be viewed as controversial as the first. One would be that if atheism is true, then it actually kind of points to the second premise being true. That if it really is the case that, say, I'm going to use a stronger word than atheism, but say naturalism is this natural world is all that exists, then yeah, if that's the case, then yes, this universe exists for no reason. It's just here. It's what a philosopher might call a brute reality. It just exists, right? But if that's true, actually, I've got another slide here. My next slide here. Here's the issue: if a philosopher believes that if atheism is true, there's no explanation, then in substance, that's the same thing as what I'm saying in premise two. What you would call that is they're making a statement that's logically equivalent to the statement that I'm making in the second premise. I'm saying, so I got a couple of examples here. So just let you know what you're seeing on the screen. So when we see like S1 and S2, S just stands for statement. I'm just kind of giving some examples. So S1 is 3 plus 1 equals 4. S2, 1 plus 3 equals 4. Now, S1 can't be true and S2 false. I'm saying like they either stand or fall together. I'm saying like it can't be the case that S2 is true and yet S1 is false. I mean, because in substance they're saying the same thing, right? And I could go through these other examples as well, but I think that probably captures what I'm trying to get at, in that to say that if the universe has an explanation of its existence, that explanation is God, is in substance saying the same thing, that if the universe, excuse me, if atheism is true, if there is no God, then there's no explanation. So in so much as they're saying the same thing in substance, the atheists who would hold to that position would actually probably affirm or could logically affirm premise two. The other side of it is too is that when we're talking about the universe, we're not just talking about some sort of like slapped together, pile of stuff here. You know what I'm saying? There's quite a few things that we're getting into, but broadly speaking, and we'll probably come back to this based on a later question I know we're going to get to, but broadly speaking, when we're talking about the universe, at least in scientific terms, we're talking about all time, space, matter / energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if that be the case, then whatever the explanation of the universe is, it would have to be something that's timeless, spaceless, unimaginably powerful, right? And immaterial, right? Well, all of a sudden, there's only a couple of options you got. And either you're talking about an abstract object or you're talking about an unembodied mind. And when I lay out those two options, those aren't just arbitrary. Like if you look at the field of philosophy, a lot of people have written on these kind of things, and the two options that you're left with that keep coming up again and again would be something like an abstract object or an unembodied mind. Now, an abstract object, we're talking about like numbers, and so for example, like the number 7, it can't cause anything. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like it's what philosophers would call causally effete. It can't do anything. It's impotent to cause anything, or if we're going to be more whatever, to stand in causal relation to anything else, right? That's just definitional in terms of what it means to be an abstract object. Abstract objects, by definition, cannot cause anything. They don't stand in causal relation to anything. And so therefore, that's off the table as being between the two, between that and the unembodied mind. That's automatically off the table for causing the universe, because they can't cause anything.
Right.
And so now, you're left with the best explanation on the table, which would be this unembodied mind. And so that's kind of like the second prong behind this premise. On the one hand, in substance, atheism seems to imply the premise too, but then on the other hand, if we're thinking about like an inference to the best explanation, God stands out, given that we're either looking for we're left with either an abstract object or an unembodied mind. An unembodied mind, that's immensely powerful, time to space is immaterial, and the whole nine. That's typically what theists refer to as God. So for those kinds of reasons, and again, this is just a snapshot, but for those kinds of reasons, we would affirm that premise 2 has some merit, more so than this negation. And then after that, you're often running into premise 3.
Yeah.
Premise 3, the universe exists. You can see what I got there. Is like if somebody suggests that it doesn't, maybe the universe doesn't exist. That's, to me, they're getting the Fred Sanford at that point. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not even engaging that, because if the universe didn't exist, then there would be no universe to ask about its existence, and there wouldn't be any beings like us to even ask about it. So it's just kind of silly. And so once you get the premise 3, then you're on home to the conclusion. Therefore, God exists. And so that was my best attempt at giving the contingency argument in a nutshell. I don't know if I made that 4 or 5 minutes, but I did avoid the 45 though. So I feel like I did a little something. You know what I mean?
Well, no, this is very good and very helpful. Don't worry about the time, but it was definitely not 4 or 5. Right. But it's great, because now at least there's a record of how we're explaining this, so everybody can see it and watch it and comment and watch it later. Okay, so now that we understand what it is in a nutshell, the basic contingency argument, let me ask one more question before we flip to the next part. Why does the existence of rationality and order point to an orderer? So, you talked about the universe existing, but I even one step further, because rationality is an immaterial concept. Mm-hmm. And this is always the kind of even if you're right, you're wrong type of thing. Like how you did it, that's last slide you did, where even if the atheist is right, they're defeating themselves in a sense. And so that same person who says the universe doesn't exist, that they don't realize that they're also saying they don't exist. So who am I talking to? So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
or
Right.
like, you know, we everybody who's making statements for or against what we're saying believes themselves to be making rational statements.
Sure. Yeah.
But where do you locate rationality in a tangible sense? Right? Oh, you say your
No, that's
brain,
good. Yeah.
but the brain is a tangible object. But most on both sides, the whole brain mind debate, I know it's been going on for a long time, but
Yeah.
most people, I think, acknowledge there's some metaphysical immaterial thing going on in our minds. It's not just the kind of like just dancing to the tune of our DNA, like Dawkins says, that if that's true, then we're really not thinking for ourselves. So there's that side, and then there's the other side that misses the fact that if rationality exists, I guess you could say that as another syllogism, then God exists, right? So how does rationality as a contingent thing fit into the paradigm?
No, that's good, man. That's good. If you don't mind, man, actually, I took the slide off, but I'm gonna bring it back if I could. Is it still up there? Are you able to bring the? Okay, yeah, cool. Because I'm actually gonna. I just kind of love this right here. I'm gonna go back to Zera Yacob, because again, we're talking about a guy, like late 17th, 17th century, and he's thinking on these things like back then, you know what I'm saying, and wrestling with the same kinds of things that we are. And he says here, therefore there's a creator, else there would have been no creation. This creator who endowed us with gifts of intelligence and reason, can he himself be without them? Now that right there is a very interesting question. And what he is doing is making a subtle argument. He's essentially saying you can't get the rational from the non-rational. That's not rational. To think that you can get the rational from the non-rational, right? That's essentially what he's saying. And there's some merit to that. So again, I want to go back for a second and remember the two phases of most cosmological arguments is that typically you're going to establish that there's some fundamental element to reality or some first cause, and then you're going to go on to talk about what that cause must be like. So let's say if you have two competing ideas about what that first cause must be. Let's say we're going to put God in that race, and God is in a foot race with there being some sort of I'll just say the universe, the physical universe, and maybe the first state thereof being that necessary entity, right? There's going to be considerations like rationality that I think is going to cause the God perspective to outpace this notion about the universe being self-sufficient, or being that initial entity. So, for example, if the universe, I'm talking about the physical universe, if the universe is all there is, like Carl Sagan says or whatever, if that's the case, I'm sorry, I'm getting one of my kids knocking on the door for some reason. I don't know.
Oh, good.
I'm doing a video. What? Jordan, are you serious, bro? Go upstairs, bro. This is wild. Yo, that's wild. So people who've been following my thread on Facebook, they know that I joke around with my kids all the time. So earlier I told my son that if he I would give him $2, I'll give him all the money in my pocket if he were to go get my computer. And the reality is I didn't have any money in my pocket, so but then once he brought my computer, he was like, we were joking about it. And I said, all right, man, I'll give you $2. And he just knocked on the door to get his $2. That's what that was. So I just got a midstream shakedown is what that was. So that's what I get for playing too much. That's my own fault. That's my own fault. Anyway, man, kids just don't care, man. It's gangster, bro. It's gangster for real. Like, yo, I don't care about this live stream. Run them pockets, homie. Let me get that $2. I want that $2. All right. Anyway.
Oh man.
So so now I'm going to flip that into an argument. So my son was able to remember from hours ago that I owed him $2 from what I told him. You know what I'm saying? But that would imply that he was able to retain in his mind one way or the other the fact that I owed him that $2. Now, my argument would be that if the physical universe is all that there is, then what explains how we are where we are right now is this domino effect from the first state of the universe, like, or we'll call it the Big Bang or the initial inflation, and then this domino of physical causes that brings us on up to today. But if that's all that the physical universe is, then that domino effect, the physical pushes and pulls that brought us to today, would also be going on in our physical brains. Saying everything in our physical brain would also be the fallout from that initial moment in the universe's history. Now, if that domino effect is really what's causing our thoughts, and not what's actually going on, out here in the world, but our thoughts are actually caused by that domino effect over which we have no control. It's just determined, I'm saying, by physics and chemistry to be that way. Then I would argue that there's no grounds for us to trust our thoughts. There's no reason that my son would remember from two hours ago that I owed him $2. Really, whatever should be going in his brain shouldn't be the event of not getting that $2. It should be whatever event that the physics and chemistry produces in his brain. I'm saying? So the fact that memory, I'm saying, is coherent as it is, I think attests to this fact that we have this rationality that can't be accounted for by just the physical world. So when we're talking about competing ideas, I'm saying, between whether or not the physical universe could be the necessary entity or whether it could be, be God, already God is out in front, because we're not trying to smuggle rationality in later on down the road. Like, we're not saying that, okay, again, on the naturalist version, we're not saying, okay, well, the universe, had this initial state and then it just kind of expanded all of a sudden. And then we have, chemistry and physics, and billions of years later, we have the earth. And then after that, we got evolution, and all this kind of stuff has to happen randomly for no cause and no reason, and just happens to produce these beings who have this really strange capability to not just go along with the physical dominoes of determinism, but actually have this first person experience and this mental activity that goes on that can't be explained by the physical constituents of the brain. So, rather than us trying to do all that and trying to smuggle, rationality in later on down the road, like the naturalists will probably have to do, we're saying that no, the reason why we have rationality is because in our worldview, in our framework, rationality is there in the beginning. We have an unembodied mind, an all-powerful God who is a personal being, and from that personal being, we have, flows our capacity to have reason, or the rational faculties. We're not smuggling in rationale later on down the road. It's at the base layer of our framework. So yeah. Okay.
No, I really like how you said that last part, because as you first started talking, the first thought that came to mind was like, great minds think alike. Because I don't know if you saw the background for the thumbnail, and I was trying to think like, what demonstrates this principle? There's no picture you can find on the internet for contingency argument.
Right.
But that's the thought I had. What you just said is that one leads to another, and dominoes came to mind, and that's why I put that like that. That, like you said, there can't be the state of infinite regression where we never get to that point. And if there was, we wouldn't get to today. So that's a logical impossibility as well. And I think the last point you made is really, really important. We're not, yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, Adam's a Christian. But even if we weren't, these things would all be true. And that's kind of the point, is that we're not reasoning from Christianity to these other realities. We're saying we understand Christianity, and none of these other realities disagree with Christianity. Matter of fact, they're affirmed greater by it and by the Bible. And so that can't be coincidental. And so that, for me, like you said, that kind of abductive approach is like, but it took y'all till like 100 years ago to figure out the Big Bang. Moses wrote this thing like that. So
That's right.
That's a coincidence. Like, how did he know?
Right.
This word of the Bible. So, like, literally the first 5 words, in the beginning. So there's a beginning. Beginning. Like the Bible gets that right before the word science was ever thought of. God. So now we have that primary agent. Even if somebody disagrees with it, they can't disagree with the logic of how that created. Next word. So now you have the contingency. It all makes sense, right? In the beginning, God created. That explains the contingency argument, and it's in the Bible. It's in the first 5 words of the Bible.
First 5 words, man. And that's what I love about it, because for me, I enjoy philosophy. I like, the syllogisms and making these nice, tight arguments. But for me, arguments like these, even the way I laid it out in the book, are more so like placeholders. They give us a jumping off point to talk about these fundamental aspects of reality. You know what I'm saying? Like, even like you said, even whether I was a Christian or not, it makes a lot of sense. Like, you know what? Actually, when I think about it, I really don't think that things can exist for no reason. Like, I'm pretty sure that's false. Like, yeah, I'm sure that there's some philosopher that will take issue with that. They take issue with everything. You know what I'm saying? But the reality is, as I'm walking around, I think it's pretty rational to affirm that. And when I think about it, if it is the case that the universe just has existed eternally and that's just what it is, then yeah, it just seems to me that there's no reason it's here. It's just here. I'm saying, if atheism is true, the universe is just here. I think that that's true. And I definitely think the universe exists. I'm about certain of that. You know what I mean? So, I like, it's to me, any premise can be controversial if you want to make it that, but nevertheless, I think there's good reason to say, you know what, actually there's something going on here with the contingency argument that points us to a deeper reality. And the fact of the matter is too, that there, like I said, there's some versions of the argument that aren't arranged this way, that don't rely upon the principle of sufficient reason. Josh Rasmussen, for example, has a great book. I think it's called. It's probably behind me. I do this like every time when I mention it. I can't remember. But I think it's called "Reason Leads to God." I believe. I'm sorry. It's like super. Almost yanked mine. Oh, here it is. Yep. So, okay, how reason can lead to God is what it is. And so it's by Josh Rasmussen. And in this book, he examines the contingency argument from a different angle, where he doesn't utilize the principle of sufficient reason, just but comes to the same conclusion. You know what I'm saying? That there's this fundamental element to reality, and the best explanation for what that fundamental element is would be that there's a God.
Amen. I'll throw another book in there while we're throwing books. And this is more dealing specifically with the problem of evil, but Leibniz figures into that situation as well, as does he figure into the free will debate. And so you can check out Flanagan's response. I think Leibniz got some things right. He got some things wrong. But as far as the contingency argument, that I don't see how you can get it wrong. So let's jump from there and so now let's think about the practicality of how this could play out in the lives of different cultures, different people, individually and collectively. Because I think even if people didn't understand, and once again, if somebody is an atheist, they may simply just off the face of it disagree with some of the premises, but I'm just asking people to pause. Just think through, where's the lie? Even if you take God out of the equation, we understand contingency, dependency, contingent. So if we start there, like you said, if we start with that as a foundation, now let's see where we can climb to get an answer. And because you've said this, and I might get the quote wrong. What was it? Can't build a strong community on weak ideas or something like that?
You can't build a strong community on a foundation of weak ideas. That's right. Yeah.
Exactly. And I love that. And so this doesn't necessarily in and of itself mean that atheism is defeated. I don't mean the contingency argument itself. I mean, kind of where I'm going, or that it's an incoherent worldview. I personally think it is, but that doesn't But I want to look culturally now at African Americans specifically and the history of sufficiency and dependence that African Americans have had on majority culture. And so once again, even in a lived practical sense, people understand, my kids understand they're dependent on me. Your kids obviously understand they're dependent on you.
Right.
But so we all, in a practical sense, understand dependency, contingency. I do prison ministry, and the brothers that are in there, they don't get to leave when they want to leave. They are dependent on somebody allowing them to leave.
Yeah.
How can understanding the contingency argument, and the reason I'm asking is because if people don't know, Adam's chapter in the Urban Apologetics book was specifically on Black atheism. And traditionally, I guess, Africans or African Americans have typically believed in God, have typically been a very religious people or lean towards that. And so atheism is not new, obviously, but I think there's a different reason that people may arrive at atheism. And I know Adam explained all that. But so how can understanding the contingency argument possibly help African Americans specifically understand in a greater way our dependency on God and his ontological makeup, because the people that African Americans have been dependent on in the past weren't the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings, so they didn't act like him.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That can make them shy away from being dependent on another Lord, another Father. And I've talked to men who struggled with coming to faith was the word Father, that God's a father, because that word had a bad connotation in their history. And I don't think people think about that all the time. But anyway, that's another point. So anyway, how can understanding the contingency argument help African Americans possibly understand God broadly and understand not just, oh, I should be a Christian because I'm Black, but this is logical and makes sense?
Yeah, man. So there's a lot of different directions we could go with that. I'll put it this way. I love reading African American literature, particularly literature. I'm talking about like the old stuff. I love reading stuff from the Harlem Renaissance. I love reading stuff from the 1800s. I love reading it because, it's funny. I sit back and I look at, like, the chapter I wrote, or when I read a blog or something like that. And then I look at some of our forefathers who just like put me to shame, as a writer. I mean, we had people in our history who were former slaves and would just,
Du Bois.
Oh, please. Guys like Du Bois. We're talking about, I'm thinking about like Frederick Douglass and Michael B. Elliott. I mean, guys who could just, write their tail off. Yeah. But anyway, one of the things I love about it is just the reflective nature of African American literature. You see a people who are constantly trying to understand themselves and their predicament, right? And what's interesting is that no matter what region of study, they find themselves, whether it be a Du Bois, who some would credit as being the father of sociology, or whether it be an economist, like Thomas Sowell, though I would have some take issue with, his naturalistic underpinnings of much of what he says, or whether it be, again, like a Frederick Douglass, whatever field they find themselves in, you see this constant coming back to a wrestling with these fundamental principles about morality, human value, human dignity. And so I think that any worldview, and I'm just speaking on a cultural level, like this is aside from Christianity, any worldview, I think, should do justice to that. I think it's kind of a sacred aspect of our heritage. I really do. You know what I'm saying? I think there's something special about that. With that being said, I don't think that atheism can, because when you think about, I say this all the time, why is Dr. Martin Luther King significant historically? Why is Harriet Tubman significant? Frederick Douglass, even inventors like a Garrett Morgan, Benjamin Banneker. I'm naming all these different people. Why are they significant historically? Well, in large part, they're historically significant because they're morally significant, right? There's a moral underpinning to their stories that resonate with us and have some importance in terms of how society is played out, right? Now, the civil rights movement, and really every freedom movement that we've had since we've been here, has moral underpinnings. I'm saying it's illogical to say, oh yeah, don't sick those dogs on us, or those water hoses, or you can't have those those whites only bathrooms or whatever. Like, those things are wrong. Like, the whole idea of challenging that wrongness is irrelevant if there's really no objective wrongness. You know what I'm saying? If there's no objective evil to be contending against, if that's the case, then Martin Luther King is in the same category as Adolf Hitler. Like, there's no moral significance that tips one in favor, that we should be favorable toward or not favorable toward. You know what I'm saying? It's all just talk. You know what I mean? Now, I said that to say, if you have these linchpins of our experience over here in America, like the civil rights movement, the abolitionist movement, every time you see somebody as the first African American to do this, those things are morally significant. But the reason why they're the first is because there's some opposition, and them being the first is like the overcoming of that opposition. You know what I mean? So, all of these different things are undergirded by this moral texture, if you will. You know what I'm saying? But the reality is, that moral texture, looking at the contingency argument, those moral facts, those moral values are dependent upon something. They're not just out there floating in the ether. Like goodness is not out there just tapping Martin Luther King on the shoulder, telling him to do something. I mean, that's not what goodness is. I mean, it's just this moral value is undergirded by something, and what we come to find is that, wait a minute, this contingency argument points us to a necessary being, a God, who indeed, from there we can explain all kind of things about our personal experience. We can explain how these moral facts that we relied upon to make the gains that we've made, we can explain that there's more teeth to them than just we feel like this is right or this is wrong. They know the very fabric of reality is underlaid by this morality that is grounded in this necessary being, God, right? And so if we're trying to make sense of the human experience, particularly in the African American context, you cannot do that without a healthy account of morality. And I'm saying that account of morality is going to fall short if you're not taking it back to this necessary being, God, upon which morality is grounded. Same thing, whether it be let's say that, again, we talked about determinism earlier. If physical determinism is true, and all of the happenings in our minds, all of our minds are just blips, just another falling domino in the physical chain of events that goes all the way back to the Big Bang or whatever. If that's the case, then it's not all that impressive that a Benjamin Banneker was able to make a watch out of wood that had all the little pieces, and it actually worked and all that kind of stuff. It's not impressive that he was able to survey DC, and the fact that his mental capacities was used as an argument against the Thomas Jeffersons of the world, who said that African Americans were incompetent. All those things are irrelevant, because all he was doing was he was just the housing of physical happenings in the brain. It wasn't attributable to anything about him specifically. Frederick Douglass is not the genius orator that we know him to be. It's just the physical happenings in his brain caused him to say this or to say that. See what I'm saying? So once you start taking, these ideas seriously, what I'm saying is that to remove God from the picture, you remove the necessary foundation and pull the rug from under things that is just immensely valuable in our heritage as African American people, i.e., the triumph of like moral triumphs and intellectual triumphs and things of that nature. So, so this is more we can say, but I know I've been talking for a while. But did you want to say something about that? Or I think you're muted, actually. Yeah, I think you're muted. Yeah,
my bad. I like how you brought it all the way full circle, even into some other areas, because I think, and that's for those listening. I know we try to be specific to one topic every live just because we can't do everything in one night.
Right.
What we do need to remember is, or those watching need to remember, is everything connects. So it's kind of hard.
Everything connects. Exactly. Yep.
So it's hard to talk about. It's hard to talk about contingent argument and not at some point talk about morality or rationality, because all these things are integrated. But once again, that's actually kind of the point as well. It would make sense that all these things would not just be some bifurcated reality that we exist in, where my brain is just coming up with things for me to do that my limbs just have to abide by. No one believes that. And so then what's the alternative? If the reality is not that, and that is the most likely effect from a purely naturalistic predecessor or time of predecession, and that's not our reality, then we're very warranted for looking for a better explanation.
No, that's really important, because, and I'm glad you said that, because that's kind of what I was trying to get at, is that all these different things that we're talking about are integrated, and the reality is you dig deeper. I mean, whether you're a Christian or not, I mean, people just look for themselves. Like if once you start digging into whether it be epistemology or whether it be axiology, whether it be talking about aesthetics, like, beauty, or, metaphysics, all these branches of philosophy, they have all these intersections. They converge in different ways, So you have reality itself. I'm saying, as we explore it more and more, the different aspects of reality in the human experience have like this, this structure to it that we don't create. Like, we're not making this up. You know what I'm saying? But nevertheless, like, why is it that as I look out in the world, there's this structure? And I'm not even just talking about like physical reality. I'm talking about there's something about how epistemology intersects with morality. You know what I'm saying? Like the fact that, like I talked about earlier, there's another way we could look at it. On the one hand, you have to have some sort of grounding for morality or objective morality anyway, in order for, I think, to make any sense of it. I know atheists will disagree. That that is what maybe we talk about that. But you have to have some sort of metaphysical grounding for morality. But on the other hand, you have to have beings who have the rational capacity to discern what's right and wrong. So not only does there have to be a right and wrong, but how is it that we have these rational faculties to be able to tell the difference? Like, why is it that I don't see, rather than walking the lady across the street as being good, running a lady over who's crossing the street as being good? Like, there's a reason why, I'm saying, if your faculties are functioning correctly, we know that if I think that running a lady over is just as good as helping across the street, there's something wrong with me. You know what I'm saying? But here now we have this intersection between rationality and morality, right? There's this convergence there. And so I think if we're going to do justice to the human experience and really make sense of, kind of come, back to even on the cultural level, if we're going to make sense of these different things, we need a worldview that's robust enough to do that. Right. And I just don't think the atheism is.
I agree. Well said. Well said. Let me just do like one or two more and see if anybody in the comments has any questions.
I'm going to keep sharing. Yeah.
Yeah. And if anybody in the comments, if you have any questions, please put them in there. Let me ask this. So you wrote about in the Urban Apologetics book, you wrote about the Great Migration and the cultural dynamics that occurred amongst African Americans and how atheism found an inroad in that situation. Like we said, traditionally, they were religious of some religion, more or less. And so this is something new. But those facts are contingent on the reality of the lived conditions of the African Americans who preceded us. So Blacks should understand, African Americans should understand primary causation perhaps better than anyone else, because we historically experienced the effects of what was caused to happen to us and our ancestors. But they also should understand, we also should understand that there can't be a state of infinite regression in any possible world. So in other words, there was a time, even historically, where the slaves that were brought here weren't slaves, right?
Sure.
There was a time when they were, a time when they weren't. And so, like I said, you keep going backward, you get to a state of freedom, and even go back farther than that, you might be under another king. But if you keep going back far enough, we get to the beginning. Not going back to the beginning, just looking at from a cultural lens, how does the reality of the memory we talk about of, man, at one point, and this is where we see a lot of the conscious community, hey, let's go back to this African way we were, and let's go back to Egypt, and let's go back to our roots. Let's go back to when we were dependent. So when we think about, obviously there was a reality that Black people were not always less than or slaves or whatever you want to say. There was a time where that was not the case. So there's this one sense that we want to go back, or some people want to go back, but there's this other sense that as human beings, since we're not just random material being acted upon, we have agency, right? So we can choose to not necessarily go back to that, but we can also choose to not be dependent now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So you're saying that you're talking about like us today, we kind of have a choice. Is that what you're saying? Or
yeah. So obviously slaves didn't have a choice. And so the idea, I guess, of contingency, and bring it specifically to the with regards to the Christian worldview, that there are other implications if Christianity is true. Like you said, morality and other things intertwine. So being dependent, not that this was always the case, but for those that got the message, the gospel from their oppressors, who they were dependent on, may shy away from it or totally be against it because of from whom it came. And so maybe there's somebody out here listening like, yeah, I hear you. That makes sense. That argument logically makes sense, but I just can't see how a God who I'm supposed to be depending on would allow XYZ to happen.
Well, what's interesting is and I'm doing a separate project on this now, but I think that we've been conditioned to not give our answers more credit or not give our answers the credit that they deserve, right? And what I mean by that is this notion of dependence. Okay, this idea that at the end of the day, there's a God who is preeminent over the slave master. There's this greater reality, right? That idea is not something that escaped the enslaved person. Indeed, it was an anchor, that was used by the enslaved person to endure what it is that they had to long enough for us to, make the kind of progress that we needed to, so we don't have to be in that situation, right? And so I think that what happens is you have people today who want to abandon the very idea that was instrumental in us being able to be free to I mean, like you said, there was a point that our people were free and then we were enslaved and now we're free again, like that didn't have to be the case, and not all worldviews, I would argue, would lend themselves to yielding the kind of people that are strong enough mentally, and even spiritually to endure that kind of that oppression. Fortunately for us, the gospel was present. And I think that we can actually I won't go too far afield there, but I will say that when we think about those who actually endured, slavery and still had this deep abiding, trust in a God who was above it all, it's just crazy to me that people who've never experienced that all of a sudden want to just write God off. You know what I mean? Like all these years later, like, no, read the words of these ancestors. Like they understood that, yes, there's evil in the world. Yeah, there's people that do grimy stuff. Matter of fact, Zera Yacob, who I quoted earlier, like in the Atala, one of his beefs that led him to wrestle with the problem of evil was the fact that you had slavery going on. He was in Ethiopia, and he had they had a trade relationship with Portugal. And some of that trade involved enslaving people and stuff like that. And so that's one of the things that he wrestled with. So the idea that there can be evil in the world and nevertheless there's a God upon whom all things depend, that's above it all, you know what I'm saying? And due to human brokenness, we experience the evil that we do. Like, that's not a foreign idea. I would say this too, and this is a little bit, and this may just be like off subject, but it's just because I just happen to be working on this right now. But when you think about it, I think that, like, let's look at you and your wife, for example. Okay, I think that if you came home and you said to your wife, "Hey, you know what? If you're going out, would you mind getting me a burger?" And she comes home and she forgot the burger. And you say, "Daggone it, we're getting a divorce." Saying, like, that's it. It's a wrap. You know what I mean? Like, I'm done with you. Like, I don't think that would be the kind of like long suffering that an almighty, all loving God would exemplify. Right? That's not long suffering. Right? I'm being kind of funny, but even if it's something more heinous, I think we kind of know what long suffering is like. We know what faithfulness is like. We know that in order to be faithful with somebody, and in for the sake of a relationship with somebody, sometimes we have to endure and have long suffering with faults in order for that relationship to work. Okay, what does it look like for an all-loving God to be long suffering to mankind? You know what I'm saying? What does that look like? Well, here's what I think it looks like. I think it looks like people doing really evil things and God providing a means of salvation and seeing it through such that the maximum amount of people will enjoy this incommensurable good of being in his presence for eternity. I think that's what faithfulness and long suffering looks like. I also think that it looks like, even when people that are called by him get it, aren't really in a moral position to live out the kind of, moral law that he would have them to, i.e., the Israelites in the Old Testament. I think that sometimes there's allowances for us to not quite get it, you know what I'm saying, so that we can make it long enough to where he can help us to get it, i.e., for example, when the Pharisees come to Jesus and say, well, Moses permitted us to get a bill of divorce. And he says, well, yeah, that's not how it was in the beginning, but for the hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed it. And I think there's a lot of other commandments that, would fall into the category in the Old Testament of for the hardness of your hearts, God allowed X, Y, and Z, because that's what long suffering and faithfulness looks like when you have an all holy God who really any sort of diverging from his moral will is worthy of him just like being out. But for that God to look long suffering, I think that's what it looks like. And so, if you have a God like that, then that's not inconsistent with there being slave masters doing really evil things for long periods of time. Yet and still, there's a very real God exists. Because in a world where there's a God who's as long suffering, more so than any of us could ever be, we would expect that there would be some wrong things going on, but that he wouldn't leave us to that. There would be an end that he's bringing us all to that makes sense of things. Nevertheless, even though that makes a lot of sense and kind of gives us some hope, if you take that God out of the picture, you haven't removed the slave master. You haven't removed, the problem of evil. You haven't removed all the oppression that we've gone through, that our people have gone through. The only thing you removed is the source of hope. that's what you did. Like you're still left with the same problems, and now you don't have a solution. All you can do is just kind of be like, oh, well, that's just the way the world is, and keep it moving. I don't think that worldviews like that are of any service really to the African American community. I think the worldview like that would actually have driven the African enslaved person into a type of nihilism that that would not give yield to the kind of civil rights movement or abolitionist movement that we see in our history. Yeah.
Amen to that. Well, man, we can keep going. I'm gonna cut it there. Amen. Richard redeemed. It does. That's why he's here. People trying to give their kids to you, man. I said you probably don't want anymore. So
no, I'm good, bro. All the kids I need, bro. I got too many. I got 5 kids that are contingent on me right now. That's enough. I can't bear any more weight of contingency.
Amen. I don't got to, and I can't either. But man, hey, before you get out of here, why don't you tell everybody what you got coming up?
Well, man, I got you coming up on the channel tomorrow, bro. So people could, if they enjoy this conversation, then they definitely want to join me, you, and MJ Jackson. So that's going to be dropping tomorrow at, I think I put it at 6:30, I believe, is when it's gonna premiere. But then also, I try to schedule it so that it doesn't run into the bodega, which I think starts at 9. So as soon as you finish watching me, Alex, and MJ, then hop over to BK Apologetics channel so you can check him out with the bodega on Friday. But yeah, so I got that, and I'm actually working on some courses. So y'all be praying for me. I'm actually looking at putting some online courses together. I've been writing out some essentially a curriculum, to make that happen. I'm at the beginning stages of that. And I got more videos with Veda Hedgeman. You know what I'm saying? I got some, he's going to cuss me out or something like next time he sees me. Cause I got like 4 videos that we recorded. That haven't even dropped yet. So he's going to be like really mad, but they're coming though, as of like next week. So I got the first one coming next week, and I'm working on some things behind the scenes. I love doing like YouTube. I love doing the podcast and stuff like that, but there's like a couple projects that I feel are kind of drawing my attention toward them, like particularly dealing with like the problem of evil and some of the stuff that we talked about tonight that I'm probably going to take some time to write on. I'm still going to be dropping videos and stuff like that, but y'all will probably see the fruits of that coming up on the channel, where I'm able to talk about certain things that I got coming up. So some of it I kind of hinted at tonight, but yeah, we'll see what's up.
Hey, I'm looking forward to all those things too. Yeah, man, I'm working on some online courses as well, so y'all stay tuned. Most of the scripts are written. For one, I gotta still keep going, so pray for us both.
Yeah, man.
Hard work, man, and we're trying to amen, and we're trying to just be faithful with these ministries God's given us. So we thank y'all. I thank y'all for the support, coming on the channel, helping me to grow, but not just about grow. I just want to get the word out that this thing makes sense.
Yeah, man. No, it really does. And I just want to encourage people, man, to, put this stuff to use. You know what I mean? Like, we're putting in, like you said, a lot of work. And I don't say that, so people can, think, woe is me, but the reason why we do what we do, and I'm speaking for you on your channel, but I know this to be true, because we really want people to pursue Christ, pursue what they're purposed to do, what they're created for. We want people to share this information because there's all kind of folks that you come across every day, in your everyday life that need to hear this stuff. Maybe they do think that Christianity is the white man's religion, or that it's irrational, or there's no rational grounds for believing it. And that's why we put this stuff out, man, because we want to combat those ideas, and this stuff really matters, y'all.
Hey, kudos to you, real quick. My man said you helped his sister make that walk
Oh yeah,
one step closer.
man. Yeah, man. Well, I mean, I think that's what this is about, bro. I mean, like, it's not about like for the most part. I mean, you're not gonna have those experiences where somebody just like breaks down crying and falls in your arms and confesses Jesus. I mean, that can happen.
Right.
But for the most part, I think it's just about having conversations with people, man, and just using these arguments as springboards to explore things that ultimately are signposts that point to God, man. And I think that it's just powerful, um, you know, see the work out there, making a difference. I mean, I can say this publicly because I said it in the book, but I mean, my sister, a couple of years ago, claimed she was an atheist, and we're still, praying for her and stuff like that. But I mean, to be honest, if I'm being, full disclosure, I mean, that's part of the reason what I do what I do. You know what I'm saying? Because I hope that somebody is ministering to my sister as hard as I'm trying to go at it to minister to the YouTube world, social media and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying, if I can be an answer of prayer to somebody else, then that's where it's at, man. But I want that for the whole community, though. Like, it's not just about Adam Cole. It's not about Alex McElroy. We're trying to give you guys the tools to go out and preach the gospel, discipling people of all nations, and baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's what this is about, man.
That's exactly. I couldn't say it better. I remember being with Greg Kokel and Jim Warner Wallace, but Greg talks a lot about putting a pebble in someone's shoe.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to wrestle with, like, somebody's going to watch this. They could completely disagree with you, but they're going to have to wrestle with the fact, no, I can't deny the fact that the contingent argument is a valid argument. I may disagree with the conclusion of God, but that, like, philosophically, logically, it's hard to negate, as you demonstrated. And so I know Jim will talk about, like you said, a lot of times in a church service or in that environment, you make the altar call, you want people to come, and you want to hit the home run. I preached
that. Right.
That's it. But Jim's was like, maybe you hit a single, maybe you hit a double, maybe you put somebody on base. And also maybe think about, maybe this is how God keeps people humble. If I hit a home run every time, I'm gonna be like, man, I'm better than Paul.
I'm a beast, yeah. I'm a beast for the gospel. Right.
Maybe, like, there's fruit that I will only get to see, that you will only get to see in heaven. There are seeds that you planted in someone's life, seeds I planted in someone's life, and I thought I failed. You thought you failed.
Yeah.
Someone kept watering, as 1 Corinthians 3:6 says, that Paul planted, Apollos watered, and God gives the increase. The other good news, the increase is not your responsibility.
There you go. Yeah.
But as an apologist, it is always tempting, because generally speaking, for most, like, we've heard the same arguments time and time, so how to answer pretty much all the questions.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's not about the answer to the question, and that's the other thing. I'm glad the way I personally came, because I came to apologetics after being in ministry and pastoring for some years.
Mm-hmm.
So I came in a reverse fashion, and I just think we got to remember that you, Ben, whoever, you're planting seeds, we're watering. That's all we can do as human beings. God is always the one that does
give the increase. Yeah, thanks.
Whew. So that was your gospel presentation for the night.
There you
go. Amen. Thank you, Adam, for coming on again. And I know you'll be back.
Hey, appreciate you having me, man.
Anytime. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate the mods. Thank you for everything you do. And until next time, peace.